Hello there. Today I'm taking another look at a Muscat Beaumes de Venise. Now if you follow the channel you will possibly have noticed that I've looked at a couple of these recently and you think, well, what more can there be to look at here? Well, this is a wine from a producer we've looked at before, Domaine de Bernardins, but this is a wine that they make as a non-vintage wine and it's labelled as Hommage, and this somewhat piqued my interest. So I thought we'd have a look at that as well. As I've said before, Muscat Beaumes de Venise has a long history. There's a suggestion that some of the grapes referred to by Pliny the Elder in the 1st century AD, growing in this part of the Rhone Valley, might have been Muscat. And once you get to the 14th century, you start to see sweet wines being made in this part of the world, as spirit is available to fortify the wine, to enable winemakers to stop the fermentation and leave a stable sweet wine. But the piece of Muscat Beaumes de Venise's history that this is in homage of relates more closely to Domaine de Bernardin. Now the domain, its name commemorates the fact that this was a site owned by the Bernardin monks, but was owned for most of the 20th century by the Castaud family. And in particular, one personality stands out, Louis Castaud, who was the owner and winemaker here in the 1930s and through to the end of the Second World War. And it's Louis Castaud who in 1945 was very much instrumental in ensuring that Muscat Beaumes de Venise gained its appellation status. Status, as I say, granted in 1945, but actually backdated to 1943 for wines that were already in the market. And this wine evidently tries to emulate the style of wines that Louis Castaud himself made. Today, the estate is run by Louis's granddaughter Elizabeth with her husband Andrew, and their son Roman is the winemaker, so Louis's great-grandson. The estate now comprises 25 hectares, of which 17 are planted to varieties of Muscat, and the remainder are planted for the production of red wines. They're slightly unusual in that the Muscat is 75% Muscat Blanc à Petit Grain, generally thought of as the best type of Muscat to use. But the balance is Muscat à Petit Grain Noir, so a dark-skinned mutation of Muscat Blanc à Petit Grain, and a variety whose use is permitted in Muscat Beaumes de Venise. Now the vineyards here sit sheltered by the limestone outcrop that is the Dentelle de Montmirail, and as a result you end up with a sort of slightly warmer microclimate than you find in some of the surrounding areas, just giving the fruit a little bit more ripeness and richness. The vineyards here are generally a soft limestone, and the best sites tend to combine amounts of sand or gravel with that limestone. The domain uses a sustainable approach to viticulture and is certified as such. In general, their approach is to try and do as much as possible manually, and they believe that the amount of work they do in the vineyard reduces the need for any chemical use of pesticides, fungicides or anything like that. They have a full-time team of 5 people working in the vineyards, and they're responsible for pruning, de-leafing, debudding and bunch thinning, and then are joined by others at harvest time. And harvest is hard work. Everything is done by hand, and they'll pass through and selectively pick, because it's important that the fruit is picked really ripe with 252 grams per litre of sugar. Fermentation takes place slowly at cool temperatures in stainless steel tanks. And the cool, slow fermentation is to try and retain as much of the beautiful aromatics of the Muscat as possible and not allow the fermentation to move too quickly, where the CO2 escaping from the ferment might strip the aromas with it. It's important to judge exactly the right stage for fortification. The wine is fortified with a 95% pure spirit to leave it with 15% alcohol and 110 grams per litre of sugar. Everything I've described is exactly the production method for the domain's normal vintaged Muscat Beaumes de Venise. So why is this special? Well, first of all, it's a non-vintage wine, and what that means is that actually this is normally an assemblage of 5 different vintages, so it's put together immediately before bottling. I'm not told how these wines have aged. I don't know if they stay in tank. I'm assuming they don't stay in barrel. There's not an obvious barrel influence here. Possibly if there are small amounts of old vintages, they might actually be stored in bonbon, but almost certainly some sort of neutral vessel to ensure the aromas aren't negatively impacted. So anyway, let's have a look at the wine, shall we? Well, the colours are very impressive, bronzed, almost sort of mahogany, golden mahogany. There's a beautiful liveliness to the colour there. As I swirl it, As I've said, the wine has 15% alcohol. It has 110 grams per litre of sugar, and not surprisingly, it's forming some tears on the glass very readily. So let's see what we make of the aromas, shall we? The aromas are hedonistic, rich aromas of sultanas. It's absolutely dried grapes. It's almost like sort of smelling sunshine coming out of a glass, such as the richness and the ripeness. There is a sort of a slight lifted fennel note that I think is the spirit there, but it doesn't particularly stand out. It's well integrated into the fruit, but it's just sort of giving it a little bit of a lift there. So let's for taste. It's sweet, it's rich, it's rounded. The producers say that this will age almost indefinitely. I mean, I'm saying it's sweet. It's a fully sweet wine, but at 110 grams per litre sugar, it's not quite as luscious and honeyed as maybe botrysized wine would be. There's still a lovely freshness. Again, though, that sort of sultana note is coming through. There's almost a sort of a slight hint of charcoal and some really tiny touches of fennel, not quite as obvious on the nose, but just at the back of the palate. There are slight hints of candied peach, but actually the fruit aromas are much more the sultana, raisin, perhaps even dried fig sort of notes. The wine has a richness, but its acidity, although fresh enough to give it balance, doesn't really give the finish a lot of focus. So actually you end with a caramelised and sultana note there, although those flavours do last well. Although the alcohol is at 15%, the richness and the concentration of the fruit ensures that it's well balanced by that, and it doesn't stand out and overwhelm the fruit on the finish. It's a more complex style of Beaumes de Venise than others that I've tried, but it's still the wine's perfume that stands out. And actually, the fact that it's only a medium-bodied wine and isn't incredibly honeyed in terms of its texture is very appealing. It's not coating much, and therefore actually the finish, although not particularly focused, has a lovely delicacy. And perhaps there are sort of just some slight perfumed rose petal aromas just showing at the end there. So yes, an interesting wine. I know that the Wine Search aggregated score for this was something like 86 out of 100. I think that's a little unfair, but at the same time, it's the beautiful fruit nature of this that is its main asset. It's not a hugely complex wine. I would be interested to see how it aged, but certainly something that's very enjoyable. So thank you so much for joining us. I do hope you found the tasting of interest. If you have, do please press the like button. If you have any comments you'd like to leave, please pop those in the comments box below. We would love to hear what your feedback is about the wines, the tastings we're doing, or anything else that relates to that. If you have any friends you think might like to watch the video, do please feel free to pass it on to them. We'd really appreciate your support in doing that. If you wanted to watch more of these videos, do please sign up and subscribe to our channel. That way you can set yourself an alert and be notified every time we release a new video. I will of course leave a link to the Wine Searcher webpage for this wine so that you can find out where it's available, what its pricing is, and all the background detail that you can get through the tabs on that page, such as food matches, information about how the wine's made, information about the regions, the grape variety, its price history. So hopefully all the background detail about a wine you'd ever need before you made a purchase. So thank you so much for watching, and I do hope you'll manage to make some time and come and join us for another tasting in the very near future. Thanks again. Bye for now.